Thanks for joining us for another edition of Religious Hard Talk. I'm Ian Boyne. Last week you heard from the atheists, and today we have two strong Christian activists. Last week you heard a self-declared homosexual talk about the importance of having a pluralistic democracy in which no particular religious ideology is privileged. In fact, the view was put forward that if you have a society in which Christianity is dominant, where the Christian ideology is given privileged status, then that in itself is a threat to human rights and is inherently anti-democratic. We have two Christians this evening who vehemently disagree. They are members of the Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society, and one is the president of the Christian Lawyers Fellowship, which had a major role in how the Charter of Human Rights was finally configured. We have with us today Dr. Wayne West, senior lecturer in the Faculty of Medical Sciences at the University of the West Indies and consultant radiologist, a well-known anti-abortion activist. Beside him is Shirley Richards, who heads the Christian Lawyers Fellowship, a group which has carried out a major lobbying work against homosexuality, which has been a major voice speaking for traditional values. Today we want to talk about that, talk about the issues of homosexuality and abortion in particularly, but more generally about human rights and how does the issue of human rights relate to our Christian status. It is said that Jamaica is a Christian country. What are the implications of Jamaica being a Christian country? Should our laws really be influenced by our religion, by our Christian religion? Or should our laws not reflect a secular democracy and more of a secular humanist spirit? These are the issues that we discuss, some thorny issues to be discussed on Religious Hard Talk this evening. We thank you for your company. Ladies and gentlemen, good to be here. I want to start first, if you allow me, Shirley, start with you, Wayne. In your view, what's the best case against homosexuality?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is to examine the philosophical framework within something like homosexuality, the present homosexual agenda is operating. And I think we have to go right back to the very fundamental. Either this universe is the first cause of all that is here, all the life that we see are simply the results of physics and chemistry, or the universe itself is a product of an intelligent being. Now, what is the evidence for that? Now, we can go into that. But the implication, the philosophical framework that arise from those two considerations are entirely different. If you start with the universe being the first cause, in other words, you are atheist, and that's where the secular concept comes out. There is no basis for any morality. There is no basis for any discrimination in behavior. It is merely a matter of chemistry. If my chemistry wants me to do a particular thing, and your chemistry wants you to do something else, then who is right? Which chemistry is right? How do you derive an ought, what ought to be done from that scenario? There is no way to do that. And then it simply becomes something of power. So if we start with a secular, atheistic worldview, then all things are permissible. And not only is homosexuality permissible, so too is bestiality, incest, and any other thing that you conceive. If, however, you think that the universe that we live in and has an origin which is likely to be in a being rather than something that artifact that has always existed, then the implications are different. And I would argue that the overwhelming scientific evidence, even in the form of biological organisms, indicate that intelligence is behind this universe. And as such, morality, the institutions we form, and so on, are derived from that intelligence. So this is where I would put the argument. It's a matter of worldviews.
Good. But even if one's worldview is theistic, and there was an original intelligent cause to the universe, it wouldn't mean necessarily that that cause would be opposed to homosexuality. There are many Christians who accept homosexuality as a moral option, as a moral variation, so that, yes, an atheistic position would crowd out any kind of necessary condemnation of homosexuality. But even within a theistic framework, there could be an accommodation for homosexuality.
Well,
wouldn't you concede that?
We are aware that there is almost nothing that you will not find someone who calls themselves Christian supporting. So we take that as a grant.
Yeah. But there are significant segments of the Christian church that accept homosexuality.
That is true.
Yes.
Like I said, no question. You will find Christians accepting any. People who call themselves Christian accept anything.
Yes.
But I tell you one thing. It means that as a matter of policy, and I think this is where Christian influence in policy, we have to look at outcomes. We have to look at outcomes. And there is no question, and I have looked at men who have sex with men. That's the area that I have looked at. That if we look at outcomes, the AIDS epidemic, there is no question, it was first identified among male homosexuals in American cities that had removed their sodomy laws. It eventually spread into the heterosexual population. But if we look at the data on HIV, you will find that consistently men who have sex with men are at great risk for it. In fact, there was a conference in Washington.
You're not seeing AIDS as a homosexual disease.
Well,
so you're not holding to that, what some would call a backward view.
Let us look at the epidemiology. Let us look at the epidemiology. We have here France, who in 2000, the World Health Organization said that the French healthcare system was one of the best in the world. Sodomy was decriminalized in France in 1791. That's more than 200 years ago. And the French is a liberal society. Their healthcare system allows men who have sex with men to come in and be tested, and they are also given highly active antiretroviral therapy. So much so that over 92% of the men who receive antiretroviral therapy have viral loads that are less than 500, which is very low. It can be as high as 75,000. Yet still, in 2010, we have research done by significant French researchers saying that HIV is out of control among men who have sex with men. Now, they use the word out of control because we speak of incidence, which is new cases of the disease. We speak of new cases per 100,000 of a particular population. So of the heterosexual population, per 100,000, you would have 8 new cases of HIV. Among men who have sex with men, for every 100,000, there were 1,006 new cases.
Now, major difference.
That study covered the period 2003 to 2008. They found that during that time, it remained stable in that it was 1,006, but it was exceedingly high, so much so that they said it is out of control. This is the reality.
That's in one country.
This is the reality around the world.
Around the world.
Around the world. In July this year, July 22nd to 27th, there was an HIV/AIDS conference in Washington, D.C. And the researchers published in the Lancet, which is the second most highly rated medical journal, that in all countries, regardless of income, the one group in which HIV is increasing is men who have sex with men.
So the Lancet said that?
And it said that
in all countries?
Regardless of income. Regardless of income. In fact, we have a study here from the Centers for Disease Control. In 2010, where they said, despite Despite, in fact, it was
Let's
2011.
take the break at this point.
Yeah,
We're
2011.
looking at the issue of homosexuality, also at the issue of abortion. Dr. Wayne West, senior lecturer at the medical faculty of the University of the West Indies, is giving statistics to prove his point that homosexuality is unhealthy. It's a part of the Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society. He has more for us when we come back from our first break on Religious Hard Talk. Welcome back. We're focusing on the issue of homosexuality, abortion, and their relationship to human rights in a secular democracy. Dr. Wayne West, who is senior lecturer at the medical faculty of the University of the West Indies, Mona, as well as a consultant radiologist and a well-known anti-abortion, anti-homosexuality activist, is here, as well as the head of the Christian Lawyers Fellowship, Shirley Richards. The Christian Lawyers Fellowship has been the primary group in Jamaica lobbying against homosexuality and trying to raise issues of concern with regard to homosexuality. Dr. West, you were giving us some statistics on the alleged unhealthy nature of homosexuality. And you referred to the Lancet, a highly prestigious medical journal, as saying that countries across income groups have shown, statistics from countries across income groups have shown that the one category,
group, yes, men who have sex with men,
men who have sex with men,
irrespective of income. That's right.
AIDS is increasing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But here is a study which was published in a journal called AIDS Behavior in 2011. And it was published by the Centers for Disease Control. And we are often told that one needs to remove your buggery law in order to facilitate and to give more rights,
freedom,
in order to decrease HIV among men who have sex with men. But this study says the sexual health of gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men in the United States is not getting better, despite considerable social, political, and human rights advances. Instead of improving, HIV and sexually transmitted infections, STIs, remain disproportionately high among men who have sex with men and have been increasing for almost 2 decades. The disproportionate and worsening burden of HIV and other STIs among MSN require an urgent reassessment of what we have been doing as a nation to reduce these infections, how we have been doing it, and the scale of our effort. They suggest that a sexual health approach has the potential to improve our understanding of MSM behavior and relationship. I give you one other statistic.
That's from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control.
Yeah, I'll give you one other statistic. There is a Professor Ronald Stall of the University of Pittsburgh who has published a lot of work on HIV/AIDS among men who have sex with men. At the 2008 Retroviral Symposium, he was interviewed by a journal called The Body. This is on the internet. What he was able to point out is that with an incident rate of 2.4% in the United States, that is new cases per 100,000 per year, men who have sex with men, if you at 18, you were HIV negative. When you got to 40, you had a 41% chance of being HIV positive. Those are the stark epidemiological facts of HIV among men who have sex with men.
Shirley,
it was higher for black men.
It was higher for black men.
Yes.
So homosexuality is clearly an unhealthy practice, lifestyle.
It's not only unhealthy, it's unnatural. It's unnatural because the anus is being used for a purpose it was not designed for. The anus is an exit. Anybody can see, even a young child can see that the anus is an exit point. I'm just saying, ordinary common sense tells us that the eyes are used for seeing.
The gays would be outraged, Shirley, that you would
The anus is an exit point, and so it's contrary to our design. Now, what happens when it's contrary to the purpose? What happens when you use things for a purpose for which it was not made? The thing is going to break down, it might leak, it's just going to malfunction, it's just going to break. And so I heard someone saying, you know, a well-known doctor in this country who told me, who confirmed to me that anal activity, anal penetration is the most efficient way of passing on the HIV virus. Is that true, Dr. Wayne?
It is true. Studies have confirmed that.
Have confirmed
Yes,
that?
yes. It's about 18 times more efficient than
18 times?
Than vaginal ultrasound, yeah. Than vaginal. I said ultrasound. I'm a
So
radiologist.
so that the percentage of gay people with AIDS
Right.
will be much higher than the percentage of promiscuous heterosexuals.
That is true. In fact, you know, the study that commented on the fact that men who have sex with men are the group around the world, respective of income, who keep. They looked at they spoke of the biology of anal sex, which Mr. Richard was speaking about. The fact that you're looking at a part of the body that has a single layer, for example, of cells. It's a columnar epithelium. It's not stratified squamous epithelium, unlike the vagina, which has many layers of cell between, which separates the surface, and is designed for, as it were, wear and tear. And they spoke about the type of network that men who have sex with men. You know, there is when we speak of rights, you know, we have to say rights to do what, and rights at what cost. And there is a group in England, a charity. It's called the Terence Higgins Trust. This is a charity that has the confidence of the English government. I say that because last year, I think in May 2011, the English government gave this charity something like over £200,000 to prepare some material on sexual behavior for children 14 years and over. I'm not sure what the content of that thing was, but what I do know is that the Terence Higgins Trust has a website. It is called Hard Sell. And on that Hard Sell, it gives the options that men who have sex with men have in terms of their expression. Because of their sexual orientation, they're attracted to men, the options that... And when you look at the things that are done, and this is why we have to discuss what the things they do. Quite apart from anal penetration, you have, and your listeners could check on these things because I will not describe them. But they have things like fisting and felching and rimming and chariot riding and water sport. All of these activities can result in serious disease.
And you are speaking as a medical doctor.
And in fact,
the scientist.
In fact, the Terence Higgins Trust is actually supposed to help to decrease HIV among men who have sex with men. So it gives them a warning that if you indulge in this, you are likely to get that. But nonetheless, it doesn't suggest at any time that these activities should not be pursued. And in fact, when we look at the lobbying of those who come and say that people must have a right to do, essentially people are lobbying for a right to pursue these kind of activities and to make them legal.
But you know, when Wilmot Perkins was alive, he would say regularly that people should have a right to harm themselves if they're not harming others. If somebody wants to, you know, smoke pot, if he's not going to have an impact on other people, if he's just damaging his body, using cigarette, for example. Cigarette, we know, is hazardous to them. It kills. But we don't ban the sale of cigarette. Perhaps we should. People know that cigarette is dangerous, but they take it. If some people, seeing the unhealthiness of homosexuality, choose to engage in it, should they have that right? Some would ask.
Well, I tell you something. We didn't always have AIDS as a pandemic. Yeah? AIDS in 1965, there was no AIDS pandemic. In 1970, there was no AIDS pandemic. Now, you don't see these two things juxtaposed, but certainly there was a Stonewall riots, and after that, the aggressive LGBT agenda, and the removing of sodomy laws and so on. Again, I have to be careful as a scientist, but what I can say, there is no question that there is a temporal, meaning in terms of time, and there is a spatial, in terms of place, relationship between the AIDS pandemic, which has killed over 33 million people, and which I think it's about 34 million people are infected, and the gay rights movement. Now it is for the scientists to go and find that link. And the other thing is that we know for a fact that HIV is a serious challenge to men who have sex with men. And I heard Professor Figaro commenting on the situation in Jamaica, who is saying that men who have sex with men act as a bridge into the heterosexual community, and they infect women. So, you know, I don't know if anybody has ever seen someone acquired AIDS in public. This must be an exceedingly rare thing, because the activity to acquire AIDS is a very private activity.
Yes.
It is an exceedingly costly public thing, though, because Jamaica has spent almost $592 million in 2 years just on prevention.
So taxpayers' money is involved.
Yeah,
borrowed money.
Yeah.
So it's not just a private activity that doesn't have public consequences.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, it has very serious public consequences, very serious social consequences. What we're seeing in other countries is a threat to more established human rights. In fact, is a threat to human rights.
Explain, yes.
Yeah. Right now, going on, there are some cases going on before
in Britain and so on.
Right.
Yes.
I can tell you a number of them. Could tell you about Lillian Ladell. Her case is now before the European Court of Human Rights. She was forced to, as a registrar, she felt forced to resign. She had to resign her job because she refused to enter a civil union of same-sex people. And because of that, she was forced to resign. There's a case of Åke Green, pastor in Sweden, who was sentenced to 30 days imprisonment because he dared to preach that homosexuality is a cancer to the society. There are others, the case of Chris Kemplin, Dr. Chris Kemplin in Canada, who, as an exemplar, well, he was an exemplary science teacher. He dared to write to his local newspaper protesting the inclusion of homosexual material within the educational curriculum. For that, he was suspended for 30 days and fined 10,000 Canadian dollars. You know, there's a case of the Johns. I don't know if you heard about them. Eunice and Owen John. Yes. They had fostered children 15 times before and tried once more, and all because they could not say that homosexuality is a good thing. Their application was not approved. You know, and so you're looking at this agenda which is stifling. This agenda is stifling freedom of expression, stifling freedom of conscience, and also contrary to religious liberty. I must talk about the case of Harry Hammond. Harry Hammond in 2001, a street preacher, 60-odd-year-old street preacher. You know, this was in England. He took a sign and he went to have a street meeting. His sign said, "Jesus gives peace. Jesus is alive. Stop homosexuality, stop lesbianism, Jesus is Lord." He was attacked by a group of 30 to 40 persons, including physically attacked. The British police came. The police was called. And who did the police arrest? No, Ian. In a case like that in Jamaica, who you would expect that the police would have arrested?
Well, the attackers, those who violated the man's
I would have
right
thought
to
that's common
security.
sense. Instead, he was arrested. He was arrested for breach of the public peace, because they said his sign was in breach of the peace.
Yes.
He was arrested, and not one of his attackers was arrested. They were the ones who gave evidence at his trial. He died within a year of that attack.
In Britain.
And I want to know, why is it that our Jamaican press hasn't carried these things?
Let's talk about that, the role of the Jamaican media. Are the Jamaican media complicit with the homosexual agenda? We'll explore that and other issues when we come back from another break on Religious Hard Talk. Two Christian activists who are members of the Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society speak on Religious Hard Talk, and they're speaking against homosexuality as an unhealthy practice and an unhealthy lifestyle. But you would ever think that the Jamaican media would not be willing to to engage in serious issues with on homosexuality. I mean, the gays complain that the Jamaican media have all of this homosexual propaganda, as they would say. You Christians must be happy with the Jamaican media.
Well, what I would say, Ian, is that I think this is a very important issue, and it should be framed properly. And
yes.
Like I said, I think it should be framed in the context of worldviews, how people see the world, and
yes.
that is something that we need to develop. But I also think that it must be framed in substance, and we are in the information age.
Yes.
So we should not be obfuscating things. So I would just want to rehash that a discussion on why persons wish to remove section 76 and 79 of our article, or the offences against the person, articles 76 and 79 of the offences against the person act, should involve to do what? Again, I want to repeat that what is outlawed by section 76, as I understand it, is the anal penetration, which is a high risk and the most efficient means of transmitting HIV in terms of intimate activity. And Article 79 outlaws things like felching, fisting, rimming, golden showers, and so on. Why should Jamaica accept that these are acts that people have a right to do in private?
As was raised on the show last week, the question is raised, is pointed out. If we're not criminalizing adultery and criminalizing fornication, why are we criminalizing homosexuality, which along with those two attracted the death penalty in the Old Testament? Why be selective? Why adulterers and fornicators go free, sinners, but homosexual sinners
I would argue
frowned
that
on legally?
Since we are in a society of which some people have rejected the Bible as a reference, then we need to use other criteria to evaluate some of these things. So I would leave the adultery and so on, but we come back to the effect, the financial and health effects of certain activities. And if we are going to be a society,
so adultery and fornication are not really as bad.
No, I'm not saying no, because they also have economic.
But they are not criminalized.
So there's an inconsistency, and I accept that.
You accept that.
But the point to be made is that we have a situation, something which has severe economic and social and health consequences.
Or would you say adultery has that?
It does. So maybe we should look at it. It has
look at criminalizing adultery.
Hold on. Adultery causes a lot of pain and lots of breakup,
financial loss,
all sorts of things.
Affecting family life.
Absolutely. But here's
you see the economic consequences of our dysfunctional family life in Jamaica.
Agreed. And we need to do something about that. And I long for the day when we'll have politicians standing up and taking a public stance for family and even as public stance against adultery and saying, listen, this is my wife. This is a woman I will stick to for the rest of my life. I long for a day when a politician will come public and encourage the people of Jamaica to be true to their families and to their marital vows. But here is a difference. Here is a difference. The difference is that adultery, although wrong and immoral, and although painful,
natural sin.
It's different because the whole matter homosexuality involves an unnatural act. When it comes to adultery and fornication and so on, it's a matter of many times who the act is with and when. For this thing called homosexuality, the act can never be right. It can never be right. Apart from that, too, what I said is that there are social consequences. When you do not have the law acts as a defining point between right and wrong, and between that which is acceptable and that which is not acceptable. When you pull that law, homosexuality is going to be equivalent. It's going to be equivalent to heterosexuality.
So if you decriminalize?
Absolutely. And then you'll get it in the educational curriculum.
So
you have to understand.
So the decriminalization is not as simple as we might think.
It is not as simple.
Because we're not talking about legalization, I'm sure, and you know the difference.
It-
You're a lawyer.
In fact, if I may,
We're talking about decriminalization.
Once
if I
you
may come in here.
decriminalize, they
Yeah.
are on the
That's
same
right.
footing, and there's
right.
nothing that can stop it from coming within the educational curriculum. There's nothing that can stop it.
There's nothing that can stop it once you decriminalize.
Right. You'll have the children looking at stories, King and King. You know, you'll have alternate family lifestyles. You have the whole thing being taught under the guise of alternate family lifestyle. There's nothing that can stop it. Removal of that law is the key to the social re-engineering of the
you still
society.
believe that the police should have a right to go into people's bedrooms
If I may
and
say
arrest
something,
them?
If I may say something here. If you had asked me, if you
Yes.
asked me 5 years ago,
Yes.
whether we should remove our burglary law, I'd say yeah. Because I had no intention of. I say you can't legislate righteousness.
Okay.
People will do what they wish to do.
So your views have changed?
And the reason my views have changed is
The research, hard
well,
scientific
no,
evidence?
even the health consideration, as bad as that is,
Yes, it's
the
not.
health consideration is bad, and I think it must be brought to the public.
Yeah.
Not only for us, for people who are not involved in the lifestyle, but for persons who are involved in the lifestyle who are not receiving this information. So that's it. But what changed my mind was the consideration that if you remove the law, that law, it brings all intimate activity will be on par. And therefore, you will not be able as a society to distinguish between any type of intimacy. And therefore, you would be able to find that what is taught in schools will have to reflect that lack of discrimination between activities. So a parent, for example, would not be able to say, I don't want my child to be exposed to fisting or to felching. I mean, I'm just using, these are not common. It said about 16% of men who have sex with men in England in 2006 were involved in fisting. But it would mean, from a logical and coherent point of view, you would not be able to discriminate between that activity and what heterosexuals do. And that is what caused me to realize that I think we need to be careful. And not only that, it is the removal of that law that prevents or that puts a constraint on freedom of speech. Because if all activities are the same, or as I used to say in school when I was a boy, if everything is everything, then you cannot say that this one is better than that one, or that this should not be allowed. More than that, in England, the master of the rolls, who is Lord Nuremberg, you know, the English have these unusual terms, masters of the rolls. It's a position dating back to the 12th century. It is the second highest, he's the second highest judge in England. And he made a statement based on the case with Lillian Ladell, that in England, there will be no discrimination based on sexual orientation in the provision of goods, services, and facilities. I think that's what I hope I get it right. May have misquoted something. But basically, that's it. The implication...
Won't you agree with that?
Well, it sounds good. The implication for that is that you have your church. If your church has a facility that it rents, you will not be able to say that, let us say there is going to be a little get-together of men who have sex with men, for example, and they will be thoroughly engrossed in what they are doing. You would not be able to say our facility would not be rented.
That would be discrimination.
That would be discrimination. And that is what people in England are feeling today. And in fact, it is those considerations that cause
So a Christian, for example, would not be able to advertise, to exclude gays. To say, I'm a Christian, you're two men, I will not go and rent the place to you.
No, listen, I don't want people to be excluded. If somebody is coming to do a job, be that job, suppose you're going to fly a plane, that's another problem. But suppose some other people are going to have a party, a little party, which would involve activity like that I do not support. You would not be able to discriminate on that basis. And it is those considerations that cause me to change my mind.
But decriminalization, Dr. West, would not affect that. Legalization is a separate thing. All you're doing is that you're decriminalizing homosexuality. You're repealing the burglary law, which means that homosexuality is not punishable. That's not the same now as saying it is on par with heterosexual. It's not the same as legalizing.
It is absolutely.
So what would be the difference between decriminalization of homosexuality and the legalization of homosexuality.
It
seems that what we're talking about are implications from legalization, which is like what you have in South Africa, which is different from decriminalization.
Once you have decriminalized it,
yes,
you have placed it on equivalent. You have made it equivalent.
I'm talking in law now, you know.
No. In law,
yes,
because there is nothing. There's no statute that talks about heterosexuality either. So both of them would now not be the subject of legislation. They would then be on par. Once you have decriminalized, there will...
Give me the subtle difference between the decriminalization and the legalization.
In this case, there is none.
You're saying this case?
In this case, there is none.
There is none.
Absolutely none.
We're looking
Especially...
at we have to touch on abortion before we go. We take our final break on Religious Hard Talk. Homosexuality, abortion, human rights, the privileging of Christian positions. These are the issues we're discussing this evening on Religious Hard Talk. Dr. Winwest, abortion. The usual argument is, why shouldn't a woman have sovereignty over her own body? Why is this Christian thing of imposing, you know, Christian ethics on the whole society and criminalizing abortion?
Okay. If I may just take 1 minute to just repeat that, I supported the removal of the Buggery law until I came across the threat to the rights of freedom, expression, conscience that it presented. Okay. And that's it. I am not here to legislate righteousness. I'm not here to do that too. Okay, abortion. We have to come back to worldviews. If your worldview is that you are merely the product of physics and chemistry, then you can kill anybody. I saw a movie years ago called Soil and Green, and the determination of the state was that there were too many persons. We were overpopulated. So when you got to 30, the state will eliminate you. And they eliminate you very nicely. They put you in a place and with a movie, and you had very lovely music. So we can do whatever we wish. In fact, people like Peter Singer, who is a
animal rights activist,
and he's a bioethicist at Princeton.
Yes, sir.
He said that you know, a mother should be free to kill her unborn her child, not when it's unborn, up to 2 years of age. Yes. So we can derive, if our philosophy is a particular kind of philosophy, we can
so
eliminate
then why
anybody.
Why should Christians, simply because they are in the majority, have the right to legislate, have the right to have their ethical views in a pluralistic universe?
Well,
imposed on the rest of the society.
Because once you start changing laws, there are implications. And listen to how this thing develops. The argument that a woman has a right to have an abortion affects the practice of medicine. Now, when we were looking at our abortion legislation, for example, the persons who drew up that legislation said that any doctor who did not refer for abortion, even if he didn't do it, should be charged $250,000 for each instance, or 3 months in prison. Now, that is coherent, because if you are in a worldview where a woman has a right to suck out the brain of her child the week before it's born and throw both the body and the brain into the garbage and burn it, because that's your worldview, then that's fine. But it automatically impacts others, because in the end, you know, there used to be a movie called Highlander. In the end, there can be only one. And the different worldviews cannot coexist. In fact, this is what the Master of the Rose in England has indicated. Now, there's a lady, her name is Cantor. I think it's Janet Cantor. She wrote an excellent, but a good article in terms of her worldview in the New England Journal of Medicine about 2 or 3 years ago. And she clearly indicated it is a woman's right to abortion. So if someone doesn't want to do abortion, you can't go into obstetrics and gynecology. The point we want to make is that you cannot simply switch to a worldview without an impact on the other worldview. Now, as a Christian, I am prepared.
So that means that inherently you're opposed to pluralism. You believe that one should dominate?
No, I'm not so certain that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is that what we need to do is to judge the outcomes of philosophies. We don't just accept slogans. For example, a woman has a right to her abortion, or So
can't
people have
govern
a
by
right to do
slogan.
what they want to do in their bedrooms. We need to examine outcomes and then make judgments based on outcomes. That's what we need to do, and that's what we're saying.
But the Christians believe
let me repeat,
that
we
abortion is
cannot
murder.
govern by slogan. And if a slogan comes up, we must examine the outcome. This is what
Absolutely.
we're saying. We want to repeat that.
But if you have a significant minority who disagrees with the view that abortion is murder, why shouldn't they have the right to exercise their humanistic philosophy?
Because it is impossible for that to be a right without forcing persons who
Infringing
don't
the right.
share the view. As you see, the legislation is there.
So it's
In
a
fact,
matter of who is powerful then?
Well,
Because you are affecting their right.
That's right.
The same way you say that their right would affect
true.
yours.
That's true.
Your right now affects theirs. So
That's
it's a
true.
matter of political power.
So then maybe we have to choose between the majority, the views reflecting that of the majority, and the views reflecting that of the minority. And it's no joke when Dr. Wayne mentioned even the whole abortion thing affects rights. Just before we came in, I showed him a case where 2 midwives, just earlier this year, were fired from the midwives in England, were fired because they refused to participate in abortions. I show you
Yes,
that.
yes. And if I may make a comment, you see, not only do we have to consider the majority-minority consideration in terms of worldview, because one is going to dominate. We must always look at outcomes. Black Americans have the highest rate of abortion in the United States. Okay? They have the highest rate of cerebral palsy because of prematurity. These things are related. Now, you know, there's a lot of politics involved in these studies. It took about 60 years for the political process to accept that cigarette smoking was associated with lung cancer, even though the first paper was written back in 1927. But the tobacco industry is powerful, so therefore it was only in the 70s or so that you started seeing on the boxes that the Surgeon General says.
Yes.
Well, there are studies that indicate that because surgical abortions are associated with increased risk of prematurity and cerebral palsy. There are studies that show that abortions are associated with increased risk of breast cancer. Not only that, yes, there are studies because it interrupts the certain cycles in the breast. But because of the political lobby, the radical feminist political lobby,
suppressed.
They are suppressed. The media does not discuss
The media don't
them.
push it,
The
yes.
media, and so on. So we are not simply saying it's a majority because the majority holds this view. We are saying that there is evidence.
Against showing
data
how unhealthy,
out there.
how dangerous these practices
Black
are.
Americans, for example, are not replacing their population. That is a fact. The Black American population is not being replaced because they are aborting themselves into extinction. Yes, you know. If you look at Europe, for example, Europe is undergoing a demographic
depopulation,
because
yes,
they either not having,
not having children
or they are aborting themselves. In fact, in England, 2 years ago or last year, I can't remember, the most common name for a boy was Mohammed.
Yeah, Muslim.
And I think the same obtained in
Yes,
France. The same obtained in France. Now,
Yes.
when you're looking at policy, you cannot run policy on slogan. My body, my right is a slogan. You have to look at the consequence, the implications of these things. And this is what we are challenging the Jamaican public to do. Look at the implications.
So surely you will put up a big fight. The Christian Lawyers Christian Fellowship will put up a big fight against any attempt to repeal the Buggery law in Jamaica.
Ian, I would hope that it wouldn't just be the Lawyers Christian Fellowship only. I would hope that all of Jamaica would want to understand the issues and would in fact put up a fight. Because you see, law...
But if the aid going cut off, the Europeans put in pressure. If the Americans are putting pressure with our porous economic situation,
you know,
what we're going to...
I was reading recently about the abolition of the slave trade and abolition of slavery generally. One historian said it was the most irrational thing that the British Parliament could ever have done in terms of repealing the law, well, in terms of banning the slave trade and then eventually slavery. Mark, you know, profits were going down, but it was still, it was still the pillar of the British economy. So, I mean, I don't think, I wish we could stand up for principles and find a way. I really do believe that if if we were to band together. For example, it's what, 53 countries in the Commonwealth and 42 of us still have these laws. Why are we allowing the other 11 countries to bully us? Why can't we get together?
Are the richest?
Well, I would say, Ian, that those 11 countries, they remove their laws based on slogans, because a lot of the studies that are indicating the problems associated with it are fairly recent studies, studies coming from about 2008, 2009. So having gone ahead based on slogan that gay is good, without evidence to back that up, we in Jamaica now have evidence. We have, like, there's a study that came out in December last year out of New York. New York just passed a bill for same-sex marriage. But the fact of the matter, the research out there showed that men who have sex with men had a 140-fold increased risk of HIV and syphilis. Now, if you are going to make policy and you have that type of epidemiological data before you, you would have to sit down and think. But clearly, in those countries, they made their changes in their laws based on slogans. And I also wonder how many of the ordinary people of those countries are aware of this kind of data. Because it is very likely that the media in those countries do not present.
But here on Religious Hard Talk, we give all views. We've given you the opportunity to present the case against homosexuality and against abortion. Last week we had people defending homosexuality, defending abortion, defending atheism. Religious Hard Talk. This is a bastion of free speech. We allow all views to contend. Next week we're going to be back with some other views. Until then, Ian Boy wishing you a pleasant evening.